Hi guys, welcome to another Divi Theme video. This is Jamie from System22 and webdesignertechtips.com. Well, today we're going to show you how you can create some awesome buttons out of text modules. We've got some buttons here. As you can see, we can apply hover effects. We can do double lines of text. We can change the shape. We can change the actual content. And you can come up with some interesting ideas of your own. Really easy to do. There's no coding involved in this at all today. So let's get started. I'm going to enable the Visual Builder. Once enabled, I'm going to go down. Let's add a text module, funny enough. And you can do this with pretty much any module you want. Divi makes it really easy for you. So let's go down. There's a little text module. Obviously, let's just move this out of the way. Put in whatever it is you want your button to say. Down below, you'll find a link. This is where you can link the module. This is how we can actually turn it into a button. Just put your link in there. Always best practice, if you're linking to your own site, keep it in the same window. If you're linking off-site to somebody else's site, open it in a new tab. That way your site's going to stay open. Down below, we can change the background. Let's see what we did with that first one there. I think we gave it a gradient. We'll just add a little background gradient there. I'll leave it on the default, but perhaps when we hover on it, let's change the color. And common to all Divi modules, if you hover up over the dark writing within a module, you'll see some little icons appear. If there's an arrow, we can create a hover state. Desktops, when your mouse is not on it. Hover, obviously, when your mouse is on it. And we'll just change that gradient. Let's change it perhaps to a red there. I'm just clicking on the actual stop, left click, and it's bringing up the color palette for that stop. And we'll make that purple that way. Fantastic. Great, well that really doesn't look like much. Let's make it look a bit more like a button now. Can't really see that text inside, so let's go over to our design. Here's our text. You can choose any font that you wish. I'm going to leave mine on the default. To audition a font, just roll over it. It'll give you an example there. Like I say, I'm going to leave mine on the default. But I do want to see it. So I'm going to make it white in color. And I think I'm going to give it a little bit of text shadow. Just to make it stand out a little bit more. Of course, I want it to be in the middle. Now we're on the hover state. I can tell by the colors there at the moment. So you can go into anyone, click on the arrow, flip it back to desktop state. There we go. Great. Well, it still doesn't look much like a button to me. So I'm going to give it a fixed width, I think. To do that, still in the design tab, we'll go up, we'll close up the text and we'll go down to sizing. Here's the width. Let's perhaps give it 250 pixels, 250px. And there it is. But of course, you're probably going to want it in the middle of your element. So you can align it just down below here. Starting to shape up a little bit, but I want a bit more depth to it. So we can close up sizing now, and we'll go into spacing, and add a bit of padding top and bottom. Let's perhaps have 20 pixels top. I'm going to hit the chain. It'll do the bottom at the same time. That's more like it. And because we've given it a fixed width, we really don't need to give it any padding left and right. I'd like to make those corners rounded. I think that's what we did with that one over there. Yep, looks like it. Looks like I capitalized that text too. So to go back into the text, you can roll over it, hit the little paintbrush icon, take you straight to it. Let's capitalize that one also. Now we'll give it some rounded corners. Again, I'm going to close up the text. For the corners, just go to border, and I'm going to give it 50 pix. Again, you just have to put the number in, it'll put the pixels in for you. Now it's looking a lot more like a button to me. Now just for fun, I'm going to add a bit of box shadow. Just lift it off the page a little bit. But I kind of like it to grow just a little bit when we hover over it, just sort of scale up a bit. To do that, we'll shut up the box shadow. We'll go down to transform, And the first one that we see here is scale. You've got scale, you've got translate, which is move, you've got rotate, which is obviously rotate, skew, and you've got transform origin. That's changing the point from which it rotates. But I just want to scale it up a bit, but only on hover. So again, I'm going to go up to the dark writing, hit the little arrow, go over to the hover state. I'm going to pull it up just a little bit till it's the size that we want. And you can slide it, increment up and down with these little arrows here. I want about 15% growth. As long as you've got that chain check there, it'll do both at once. If you want to do different values for each, just uncheck that chain. Great, well there's our first little button. It's working fine. Now our second one there, we got 2 lines of text and a little separated gradient background there. So for expediency, let's just clone this button here. I'm going to go into this one. To add a second line of text there, put your cursor on the end and hit Shift to return. That way it won't give you a big space. And I just use some square brackets. And I think whatever it is you want to say in yours. Great. And we squared off those corners. Obviously put a new link in there if you want to. For the background, we've got our little gradient going on there. If we go into it, there's our little gradient. To make them separate those colors there, I'm going to take these both to 50% so they're on top of each other. And let's perhaps just change the color of this one to purple. Just click on it. The color. There we go. I'm going to take that to 50%. So they're on top of each other. As you can see, we've got a complete line between the two there, which is great. And that's quite good looking on its own. If we roll down a bit, you can change the direction of it. You can change that to 90 degrees. There'll be left and right. That works pretty well. But there's all kind of different gradients you can use. Just up above, you'll find gradient type. We're on linear at the moment, which is kind of in a line. Let's change it to perhaps circular. And that's a nice little feature too. You've got elliptical. You've got conical. You can do all kinds of things with the gradient. You can add more stops if you want to. I'm going to put it back how it was on the circular. And let's perhaps put it on the left hand side. Great. And the only other thing I did to that button was take the roundedness off those corners. Back in the design. Here's our border. Let's change that to perhaps 5 pixels. And again, you only need to do one. If you've got this chain checked in the middle, it'll do all of them for you. So there's our second little button there. If you wanted to take it a little bit skinnier, obviously take a bit of padding away. Back into the design and spacing, we've got 20. Let's perhaps change that to 10. Just remember, we've still got a fixed width on this one. Great. So that's our second little button there. Now our third little button, I think we went in there and what did we do? We made it bigger and smaller. Let's just see what it looks like on hover. That's right, we changed the size of it on hover there. Really easy to do. We'll add a new text module. Let's go down. We'll say click here, or whatever you want to say, obviously. Great. Background. Let's just make it black. And we'll go over to our design, to our text. Want to make that white. Want to pop him in the middle. So let's close up our text here when you're happy. We'll go down to spacing. And again, let's give it 20 top and bottom. Hit the chain, it'll do the bottom. And again, we're going to use sizing to change the shape of it. So I'm going to close up spacing. Sizing is just on the top of it. Initially, let's make it 250. 250 pix. That's great. We want it in the middle. Then when they hover over it, let's take it down to 150 pixels. So again, with the width, let's hit the little arrow. We've got our regular state 250, hover state, let's make that 150. Now the time it actually takes to get from desktop to hover state, by default 300 milliseconds. You can slow it down or speed it up if you want to. To do that, and this is again common to all Divi modules, go over to the Advanced tab, down to Transitions. Transition duration, there's your 300 milliseconds. Let's maybe make it 600 milliseconds, just over half a second. Don't want any delay, want it to happen as soon as their mouse hits it. Speed curve that I like to use for these is ease in out. When you're happy, just save your changes. Great. Okay, for our next button, the circular button, I'm going to add a new row. I'm kind of running out of real estate here. I'm going to put 2 columns in it. And let's go down. We'll add a text module yet again. For the content here, I'm going to say my, then I'm going to hit shift space. Awesome. Shift space again and button. And let's roll this up. There it is right there. Obviously put your link down below. Let's put a background in. I'm going to put red and let's perhaps have it changed to blue on the hover. Again, hit the little arrow. We'll go up there on the hover state. We'll make it blue. Great. Well, let's pop that text in the middle and make it perhaps white in color so we can see it better. Again, I just clicked on the little paintbrush icon. I'm going to make it white and I'm going to center align it. And let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's perhaps take it up to 20 pixels. Default's 14. Great, well that's going to work for me. Now to make a circle, we need to start off with a perfect square. So let's make this into a perfect square. Still in the Design tab, we'll close up our text, go down to Sizing. Width, I'm going to give it 250 pixels. It's put in percent there, let's change that to pixels. It's more like it. And we'll do the same for the height down below. We've got a perfect square there. Now to turn that square into a circle, we can do that with the border just down below. Instead of pixel value, I'm going to use percentage this time. I'm going to put 50%. As you can see, we've got a perfect circle. Just what I wanted. Well, I'd like to style the middle word slightly different from the other 2 words there. Let's go back into our content here to the text itself. I'm going to select that word, awesome. I'm just going to make it bold for the time being. Now to style it some more, we can go into the text rather than the visual tab. And it's actually added some strong tags there. We can go inside that strong tag, and I lied, we're doing a bit of coding, I forgot about this, I apologize. Going to make a gap there just before the pointy bracket. I'm going to write the word style, S-T-Y-L-E, equals, and open 2 lots of inverted commas. Inside, we can style it how we want. Let's just make it a bit bigger. Let's say font size. Let's say 30 pixels. That may be a little too much. Colon, 30 pixels. Oh, I think that's going to work fine. And you can keep coding if you want to. Just put a semicolon at the end of that and you can change the font family, the color, whatever you want to do with it. For instance, color. This isn't going to work very well, but let's say blue, etc. I'm happy with it to be white, so let's take that away. Great. I'd like to see a little bit of text shadow on there as well, I believe. So again, we'll go back over to our design, to the text. Pop a little bit of text shadow on there just to make it stand out. Great. But of course, I'd like it to be somewhere central. We know this is 250. Let's try giving it 75 padding on the top. So we'll close up our text again. Down to spacing. Here's the padding on the top. Let's try 75. That's pretty much there. I want perhaps a little bit more. Increment up and down with these little arrows if you need to fine tune it. Get it to where you want it. Great. Well, that's awesome. We've got a round button there. It's got a link. It's going to change color when we hover over it, but I'd like it to spin also. To achieve that, still in the design tab, we'll close up spacing. I'm going to go down to transform again. This time I'm going to use rotate. I'm going to rotate it around this axis. What I'm going to do is rotate it clockwise to 359. Unfortunately, you can't do 360, it won't move. There are 359, and again you can increment up and down with the little arrows if you need to. But of course I only want this on the hover state, so let's just copy that and delete it. Bring up the little arrow again, hover state. There we go. So it's going to go from that to that when they hover over it. And the time it takes again is that default 300. Let's slow it down for a bit of drama. Over in advanced, transition. Say 750 or 3/4 of a second. And we'll use the ease in, ease out again. That way when they take their mouse off, it'll ease back out. Great. And just for final effect, we'll put a bit of box shadow on there. Back over to design, down to box shadow. Let's pop that in. Great. Okay, well I've got one more to do here, and that's this one that actually changes content and shape on hover. So what I'll do, I'll create a new row for this. We'll give it 2 columns. The reason I'm going to create a new row is because when we actually change the size of it, it may make the content below jump as the size changes. We can give the row a fixed height to stop that happening. So again, funnily enough, I'm going to use a text module. And do experiment. You can use all kind of modules and do this sort of thing with. I'm going to leave the content just as it is. Obviously, you want to put a link in. Background. Let's make it almost black. There we go. That works for me. Text, we'll hit the little paintbrush to go straight to the text. I'm going to make that white. I'm going to leave it where it is. And I want to actually put it in the middle one more time. Now sizing wise, I'm not going to use sizing on this for the moment. What I'm actually going to do is use spacing. I want to give it a bit of spacing around with padding. Let's perhaps give it 40 pixels all round. Do the same for left and right. Great. Now when we hover over it this time, I want that to change to perhaps learn more and end up as a little button in the middle there. So to do that, we can go back to our content over here into the text itself. Again, roll over the dark writing, hit the little arrow. When we hover over it, I want it to say perhaps learn more. And for fun, let's make that into a heading 3 perhaps. Just select it, go up to where it says paragraph, click on it, turn that into heading 3. Now heading 3 is obviously dark, so if we hit the little paintbrush, it'll take us straight to the H3. Make it light so we can see what's going on. Okay, well that kind of works, but I want it to shrink down. I don't want it to be half as wide as this. In fact, I do want it to be exactly half as wide as this. So to do that, still in the design tab, we're going to use sizing for this. Let's close up our heading text, go down to sizing. Again, we'll get up our hover state. Now a regular desktop, you can leave it on auto or you can put in 100%, which is auto pretty much. It's going to take up 100% of the real estate available there. Then when we hover over it, I'm going to make it about half that, let's say 50%. Yeah, that works, but again, I want it in the middle. I perhaps want it a different color. I don't want it to be quite as fat as that or deep as that. So we can change that with padding. So while we're here, let's close up the sizing. Spacing is just below. Again, bring it up, hover state. I'm going to change all those values from 40 to 20. And again, because we've got the chain highlighted, it's doing both at once. That's a bit more like it. I could even make it less than 50% there, but that's entirely up to you. Got a little more space on the bottom than the top there, so let's uncheck that chain and increment down perhaps with the bottom. You'll see it shrinking up as I do that until it's about the size you want. But I go back to desktop. You can probably see where it says archives down the bottom there. It's jumping when I do that because basically the size is changing and it's pushing that down and pushing it up. And we'll fix that in a moment by giving the row a fixed height that it's sitting in. But before we do that, I want to push that button down a bit so it's more central when they hover over it. To do that, I can do that with margin. And again, I only want it when they hover over it. Let's give it, say, 50 pixels at the top. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's about right. Obviously, adjust it to taste. And I want a different background color on hover. Again, bring the little arrow up, hover. And there's the blue. Okay, to stop that jump effect, and I also want to slow this down as well. So let's just slow this all down. Again, over in transitions in advanced. Let's make it, say, 3/4 of a second, 750 milliseconds. Ease in, ease out. It's going to work again. Great. Now to stop that little jump effect, we're going to go into the row. I'm going to give it a fixed height. Over to design, sizing. I'm sure you know where height is now. Here's height. You could give it a minimum height if you wanted to. I'm going to use fixed today. Let's say 350 pixels. It should push that down a little bit. Great. Now when we switch between the two, it's not going to jump. So let's save our changes and make sure all these buttons are going to work on the other end. Hit the little purple button. Save draft or publish if you're ready. We'll exit the Visual Builder. Okay, where did we start? We started off with our little button here that's going to scale up and change gradient on hover there. Our second one was a little button with 2 lines. And again, we changed the gradient in the background there, but it's got 2 lines. Our third one is actually going to shrink a little bit. Our next one was our little circular one that's going to spin and change color. And our next one's going to completely change content and turn blue. If I roll that up a bit, you'll notice that this is no longer jumping down the bottom here. So let's roll over. And there we go. So there's how to create some awesome little buttons using text modules. And do experiment. You can do this, like I may have mentioned earlier, with just about any module you want. I hope you've enjoyed this today and found it useful. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, ring the bell, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once again, this has been Jamie with System22 and webdesignandtechtips.com. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.